Welcome to the seminar, The Right to Nationality, The Right to Human Rights. This is a joint seminar between SOAS, the Swedish Organization Against Statelessness, and Unhcr, the UN Refugee Agency. My name is Erika Lefgren, and I'm the Senior Duber Solutions Associate at Unhcr Representation for the Nordic and Baltic countries. Today we will be talking about statelessness. Before delving into the topic, I would like to introduce our speakers. Jehna Al-Moushahidi is the founder of the Swedish Organization Against Statelessness. Wilfred Buchon is the Deputy Representative at the UNHCR's representation for the Nordic and Baltic countries. During this seminar, we will talk about statelessness, what it means, and what statelessness looks like globally and in Sweden. First, let's start with a deeper look into what statelessness means.
Consider for just 1 minute what it would be like if the country you were born in and had lived your whole life didn't consider you a citizen. No country did. You belonged nowhere. That is the shocking reality for millions of people who have no nationality. They're stateless. Most people are citizens of somewhere. We have birth certificates, we have passports, we have ID cards, we have driver's license, health cards, documents proving who we are. But on paper, stateless people simply don't exist. In fact, I can't even tell you how many stateless people there are because over half of all countries don't even count them. Globally, countries that are counting have accounted for nearly 4 million people. But in all likelihood, the actual number is much, much higher. Without a passport or a national ID, the list of things you may not be able to do is never ending. Go to school, see a doctor, own a SIM card, work legally, open a bank account, own or rent a home, even get married. And statelessness exists everywhere. What can we do? For lawmakers and courts, we say, you have the power to challenge and change the laws that lead to statelessness. More and more countries are signing up to the conventions that aim to end statelessness. In some situations, it can be complex. It can take time, effort, and paperwork. In others, it takes a few words or the stroke of a pen to give people the rights they deserve, to give children the chances and opportunities in life they so richly need. Either way, it's a man-made problem that we can solve. Let's do so, because everyone has the right to belong.
Let's start by looking at the global situation. What is the situation of stateless people globally today? If I start with you, Wilfred.
Thank you, Erika. Let me recall that what statelessness means. A stateless person is a person who is not considered a national of any state, which means legally you do not exist, you're not part of the legal system of that state. And in reality, in fact, is that you are in limbo, you have no rights, you do not exist on paper. This is why we often call statelessness the unknown or hidden problem, because stateless people are neither seen nor heard, and statelessness does exist in all parts of the world, is not limited to one continent. We have nowadays, if you remember, in the situation of Myanmar, I think the most significant statelessness issue, where people also had to flee in the hundred thousands to Bangladesh to seek protection. But we do have statelessness populations also in the Middle East, in Kuwait, and the Palestinians as a group, but also the Feli Kurds. And we have statelessness people in Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire, also Kenya, and linked to minority situations there. But we have statelessness people, of course, also in Europe. And in Europe, I think the number is over 500,000. I think globally we count 3 to 4 million, but because the problem is not well recorded and half of the states do not record who is stateless, we don't really know the exact number. For Europe, we know it's about 500,000. And the situation in Europe has been mainly caused by the dissolution, by the succession of two big states, the former Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. When those states fall apart and new states appeared, that many people who were citizens of the Soviet Union were not automatically citizens of the new states coming after. So that was one of the key reasons. The second important problem for stateless people is the discrimination in the legal system and also in the administration system. Laws do often not provide enough safeguards for children who are born in a country and who may be then stateless to acquire a new citizenship or a citizenship. Laws are gender discriminating. I think mothers, for instance, do not automatically confer the citizenship to their newborn children. I think in 25 states we have that gender element still today, and that means that if the father is unknown, the father is seized, or the father is missing, then that young child would be stateless, even if it's born in Sweden by a Syrian mother. And lastly, we have the issue of the political will. That is often the important part, which shows that 75% of the stateless population belongs to a minority group. In more than 20 states, the nationality acts on purpose not granting the citizenship to the minority groups or taking it away and leaving them stateless without rights. And we have, of course, also the political situation with populism being on the rise, with security issues being raised, and which leads to the risk of becoming stateless. That is, I think, the situation of the world today. The only hope is that there are continuous efforts underway, also in the context of what we call the I Belong campaign, which was started by the United Nations, Unhcr, with partners around the world. And that campaign sort of is focusing on providing support to end statelessness. The good news is that statelessness is a man-made problem. It's not linked primarily to conflicts and war, which means we can end it. We can end it by changing the law. We can end it by having the political will to do so. We can end it by giving people rights so that they feel that they belong.
Thank you very much, Wilfred. To you, Jehna, we've heard about the global statelessness situation, but what does it look like for stateless people in Sweden?
Thank you. And in Sweden, it's estimated that around 30,000 persons are stateless, and their situation very much varies. And we've seen that our organization works together with the reference group of stateless persons. And what we can see is that it very much varies depending on where you live in the country. If you live in maybe it's a smaller society, in a smaller city, you may have more personal contact with, for instance, healthcare workers, and therefore can have access to health and healthcare, while others may not. And we see that they're often in a limbo situation where they cannot be returned to any country, but they also are not allowed to stay in Sweden. They can also not use bank ID, which many people in Sweden do, to as a form of ID online. They cannot order packages or sign up for a cell phone service. So there comes with being stateless in Sweden comes with a lot of obstacles.
Thank you very much, Jehna. While you're talking about the challenges that stateless people face in Sweden, and you are representing the Swedish Organization Against Statelessness, SOAS, I would like to hear a bit more from you. What is SOAS' role in addressing the challenges that stateless people in Sweden face?
We do a lot of advocacy work mainly, but we also work targeted towards stateless persons to sort of echo their voices and advocate their views and perspectives on this. So last year we had a campaign on children's rights, that stateless children in Sweden should have access to nationality. And we do a lot of shadow reports and try to really get the word out there, what statelessness is and what it means, and that there are actually stateless persons in Sweden, because there's not a lot of people that actually know that, or they may confuse them with undocumented refugees, or so there's some confusion about statelessness that we really try to straighten out, and really try to spread the word and really do information sharing. And also we work together with the European Network on Statelessness, where we are now writing a report for the Swedish Migration Agency on how they can determine whether or not someone is stateless in Sweden.
Thank you, Jehna. Wilfred, I'm now turning to you. Could you tell us a bit about UNHCR's role in addressing statelessness globally and in Sweden?
UNHCR was tasked by the United Nations to support states like Sweden and others, of course, also non-governmental organizations, to find and address ways to end statelessness. And in that area, we're looking at 4 specific parts. One is to identify who is the stateless person. We heard there's often undocumented people around, but they are not necessarily stateless. This can be identified, and it can possible that the person has another nationality. So the identification of statelessness is a starting point. We are tasked to support the protection of stateless people by giving them a status as stateless persons in the country with rights. This is not the same status necessary as the refugee status. Stateless people can be refugees, but not all stateless people are refugees. But there is a right, of course, as a stateless person under the conventions also to have a status and access to rights. We also are tasked to help to reduce the occurrence of statelessness by strengthening the safeguards for children born stateless, or also reducing risk of losing citizenship. So that is an important part, and that's framed in the 1961 Convention. And then, of course, I think it's important to prevent statelessness from happening. So that is a clear part to help the efforts made internationally, that whenever there's a state succession, that the laws and the rules are clear, that nobody falls within that gap. Looking at Sweden, our work is very concrete and practical by advising, providing guidance to the government, to law proposals, and to other partners, organizing capacity building events, but also raising awareness like today with all of you, to make people understand that there is a problem with statelessness, even if we don't see it, but it exists, and that also we can do something about it. That is very important. And lastly, of course, we need the political will to address the problem. And I think in Sweden, I'm glad to say that at least a lot of attention has been given in the past to the statelessness situations, because statelessness occurs also out of the migratory context. And in that regard, we've seen the numbers really going down in Sweden with regard to those who were stateless here for a long time. And we are encouraging Sweden to continue those efforts. And I think with the pledges they have made to the Global Refugee Forum on Statelessness, and their role in the Friends of the campaign, of the I Belong campaign, which UNHCR has developed, I think there is some good hope.
Thank you very much, Wilfred. We will now turn to a video, and where we will get a better idea of what statelessness can look like in reality, from Al-Moushahidi, who is a stateless and has lived in Sweden since 2015. So now let's listen to his story.
Yes. I'm stateless here in Sweden since 2015 in September, and I applied for asylum. And since that date, I got 3 negative decisions. Being stateless, it means that you don't belong to any country, you don't have any nationality or any citizenship. I can't work, I can't study, I can't even get a mobile number, I can't stay in Sweden, and at the same time I cannot be sent to any country. I have 2 children, 3 children actually, 2 here with me in Sweden and 1 in Dubai that I never seen or met because I'm stuck here in Sweden. They are frustrated from the situation, especially my daughter. She will be in gymnasium very soon, and she's thinking about the future, how she can complete her degree without Persian number. It's like a nightmare. She's always said, we will never get the Persian number and I will never meet my mother. Maybe it will come another 10 years to see my mother. It's really bad. They grow up day after day and they keep asking why we are stateless and why this happened to us. And I don't find answer for them.
And now coming back from the video, Jehna, I'm now turning to you. Based on the video we just watched, is Al-Mounshahidi's experience similar to the stories that you hear from other stateless people in Sweden? And what should Sweden do to address these challenges that he is mentioning?
Absolutely. His story is in no way unique, unfortunately, but we also meet people that are both better off and worse off. So, for instance, we've met with a lot of disabled stateless persons as well that cannot access the healthcare that they need or the education that they would require to learn Swedish, for instance. And then we also meet with stateless persons that have been fortunate enough that they are able to work or go to school. So it very much varies, but Al-Moushahid's story is very typical for the stateless people that we meet. And what Sweden needs to do is first implement a statelessness determination procedure in order to see who is stateless and not, but also just bring the issue higher up on the agenda and keep spreading awareness about what it is, but also with the new migration proposal, there are some issues there where it's very difficult for stateless persons to become citizens in Sweden and become naturalized citizens. So there's also some work to be done still there, and SOAS hopes that there is enough political will to get through some of these suggestions that will make it better for stateless persons.
Thank you very much, Jehna. Wilfred, now turning to you. How does UNHCR assess the story of Al-Moushahid? Is it typical for the situation of stateless people in Sweden? And what is UNHCR's message on what Sweden should do to address the challenges of stateless people?
Indeed, the heartbreaking story we heard from Al-Moushahid is sort of standing for many, many of the stateless people who are here in Sweden, but also around in Europe and the world. I think for us it's very important that we look at that from the perspective of we can change that. And it starts, as Jehna said, with the identification of who is stateless. In Sweden, we have currently the definition of the 1954 Convention is not even in the law. So at the same time, we don't have a statelessness determination procedure. So our call on Sweden is really to look into that and establish that procedure. And with the procedure, of course, when you have the status of a stateless person, then there should be rights to that status. Also, that is outlined in the 54 Convention. And similar to the Refugee Convention, it's important to give people then those rights and to make clear that we have a determination procedure, which doesn't have to be heavy. It's not in terms of numbers very many, but I think it's in terms of the clarity. And to be honest, most of the stateless persons currently in Sweden are refugees, so they are recognized as refugees, but there are many also who are not refugees and in that sense need that support. Secondly, one needs to look at the safeguards for children born stateless in Sweden. We do have a good system with the notification procedure, but that notification procedure requires that the born child has a legal residence, a permanent residence. That, of course, is the major obstacle now after the changes have happened with the temporary law to acquire basically a statelessness, but it's also not in line with the 61 Convention, which does not require a legal residence. It's just a habitual residence. And in that way, I think it's important, and here we say it's often the common sense approach to look at the child best interest first. And I think the 61 Convention, together with the Convention on the Rights of the Children, requires to have either an automatic acquisition of the citizenship when you are born stateless or as soon as possible. That is in the interest of the child, and that should really prevail. Thirdly, I think there is an area which is linked to the data, and we have currently more than 10,000 people with an unknown nationality. Indeed, it indicates how important the statelessness determination procedure is, but also worldwide. I think if we do not clarify the status, we do not know, and people cannot be given basically the guidance. But also as a last point, even if a person is stateless in Sweden, it does not mean that Sweden in all cases is responsible to provide protection to that person. The person usually have another residence in another country, and if that habitual residence is still accessible, it's still possible to go there, that can also be the solution, the answer to the problem. However, you cannot expect a person to go somewhere where he is not accepted. And we have a practice here often that you have to prove every year that you cannot return to country A, B, C, and D. And you can do this, of course, in the beginning. But once you have proven at least several times that the state will not accept you, is not allowing you to enter, then common sense says, okay, then that person should be granted the protection here. And let's not forget, ending stateless doesn't mean to give stateless people just a status. It means also stateless people to start being integrated, learning the language, and then acquiring the citizenship of that country. That only ends statelessness when you belong again to another country. And in that case, it could be then Sweden.
Thank you very much, Wilfred, and thank you very much as well, Jehna, for this discussion today. We have now reached the conclusion of the seminar, and as we have heard, statelessness continues to impact the lives of millions of people globally and in Sweden, including around 20,000 people in Sweden. While it is positive that this number has gone down significantly in Sweden and in other countries in the past years, Sweden has, for example, granted citizenship to more than 25,000 persons. We learned that there's still a lot to do in Sweden in order to end statelessness. And the current government led inquiry on nationality, as well as the Swedish pledges made in the context of the Global Refugee Forum, provides a good opportunity and including globally the UNHCR running I Belong campaign, which also aims to end statelessness by 2024, to do this in the course of the years, and of course together in close collaboration with the work of SOAS. And the story of Al-Moushahidi and his family and many others who are in a similar position has underlined the importance to make these steps forward. So thank you very much, Jehna and Wilfred, for joining the seminar today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all of you very much for joining our seminar. Please visit our booth for more videos, information, and a chance to chat with our colleagues from UNHCR. The full video of Al-Moushahadi's story and more information on statelessness can be found at UNHCR's digital booth, as well as UNHCR's website, as well as SOAS website. Thank you.